do you want to start off and say some background on what you're thinking about notes and note taking and the apps formerly known as tools for thought?
I want to ask why you say formally, but maybe I should answer your question. So I just sent you this random thought the other day. I don't think it was provoked by anything specific. I think I am... Obviously, I made my own... some people might call it a tool for thought, right? Hyperdraft, turn your text notes into a website. You can have private notes, turn it into a website. And then there's this graph stuff like LogSeq, Roam, which I'm following from a distance and seeing how people are using it. Never really found a fit for that with myself, but just curious how other people are doing. And then I prompted you with this question because I quite firsthand experienced the way you use LogSeq because we had this call 6 months ago and you silently took notes during the call and then asked me permission and then you published it. And it was really cool to see kind of this detailed breakdown of what we talked about and the links and stuff. And to share that on social media, other people can benefit, etc. And I always thought of how cool that was, and I don't have the reflex to do this. And part of me is just wondering, like, what is it about? Why don't I feel comfortable with graph notes or like journaling and in the way that those tools do it? And so I was just curious how it's going for you, and just wondering how, I guess, sustainable it is for you, or do you feel that it's energizing to do it? Are you kind of feeling overwhelmed? And I mean, you kind of responded to that with your audio note and your public note. But it's just about how's that going? Like, does this actually work? Basically, is kind of maybe a simpler way to ask the question. And if it's hard, like, what's hard about it, and how can we make it better?
I think. I mean, even note-taking as a thing, I mean, I think note-taking and journaling are two very different things. For me, note-taking and posting in public is the continuation of a tradition that I've been doing for over 20 years from blogging. So that's one. I think in a business context, not just business, but generally any sort of a meeting that isn't just hanging out, there's going to be some like follow up, like someone has to take notes. If you look at things like Google Calendar, they actually now prompt. I think the calendar item, if you look at it, actually says something like "take meeting notes," and it'll like automatically create a Google Doc, including some like timestamps, and I think the title is based on the like meeting title and stuff like that. I do a ton of writing, and I do a ton of writing for groups of people. I'm a member of a number of different online communities and networks where, a meeting, unless it's recorded, video recording, you don't like, okay, so what happened there? I'm also terrible at consuming video. I'm much better at transcripts and written stuff.
Raw eyeballs into your raw text into your eyeballs. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So there's a couple of things there that kind of explain the like texture of some of that stuff. I was looking back. It was a delightful prompt. Your questions. We were going back and forth over DMs and some. You and I have gotten the habit of I think, which is pretty common among quite a few people, is oftentimes recording little asynchronous audio messages, Signal, WhatsApp. Lots of things support that, iMessage, etc. And then it was interesting questions, so I took it and wrote up the kind of long form version of stuff in my notes, which was also, once I wrote it down, like I write to understand what I'm thinking. As well, like that's for me has, which I think has more to do with the tradition of journaling. And the fact that it's, I'm currently using LogSeq. The fact that it's more graph or node based, ultimately, like in part, it has different features. So that will lead to different things, a slightly different style. But in many cases, I very often end up with the same sorts of patterns of types of things. Like basically, if a system doesn't have these features, I'll end up putting them in some way. You know, I want to keep track of a link or an article, and I want to make sure that that link stays around. Perhaps with a quote or something else, or with some tags that let me find that link again, that it's about note taking or graphs or hosting or GitHub pages or whatever. And I find that really useful. So the you know, you can do these in many different like things. Yeah, so I'm kind of rambling in a bunch of different directions here, right? I think that
Yeah, actually, so you brought up something now, which is maybe I forgot to mention this as part of my question. This is really the principal thing, like this aspect of graph note taking. I called it, I named this kind of reflex, which is like a habit of trying to notify all the things, NODE, like turn it into a point on the graph so that it connects to things. Like even if, for example, if you don't have a page or a note about something, some people will just put brackets around it, and you can look at some of these public graphs or notes, and you click on this thing that's a link, and then there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So, and that's fine, right? It's just part of a reflex. Like I understand that those things can accumulate later on, but there is some work involved in structuring in this way and trying to turn things into entities and objects and put metadata and all of this. And so
right, but I think what you're getting, like in part it's the tool, and in part for me that's literally how my brain works. You know, I want to be able to have that reuse. So tags are a different kind of bucket. I very much like tags where the tags themselves are objects. Not everyone is like this. Some like them as just these kind of plain classifiers. But I think them as yeah, nodes and edges, right? So
can you just clarify what do you mean by objects here? Like how is it different from just a bit of a word attached to a thing?
Right. So very simply, and this is like part of very many different systems that I've used for contacts, for notes, for various other things like this, where like even a page isn't the thing. That may be the simplistic way of thinking about it, because people are thinking about like web pages or something like that. You know, but if you think of something like Google Docs, it's essentially like an infinite scroll. Like you can turn off the part where it pretends that it's printing pages. And so the page is an object because I've given it a title and I've tagged it with article, and I always include a link. And that's going to be my internal classification that this is an article with a link, and because I've just used a tag called article, and that's a case where I'm like using tag as classifier. I'm end user programming on the front end is what I'm doing.
Okay.
And then I have another page called Rosano, and I tag it with person. And then I might also I might tag it with a developer or zero data app. And then zero data app, of course, is also a page and a concept. And I might link back to Rosano there, or add a link, and in this way, I'm building up this graph. So this is how I've always done it one way or another, and doing it with just, you know, if I'm mentioning someone in an article, and I'm not linking to my own version of a contact for them, I might want to link to their name to their website or a social media handle. So that if people want, they can follow the link and get some context of like, who is this person?
Yeah. So you use tagging as a way to give things a type.
Yeah, types and classifiers, and I wrote about this a little bit before. I'm writing for me, which means it's not always parsable by other people very simply.
Right.
So that future me can come back and get a search and be reminded of these interconnections. So, and the why or the how of some of this stuff is I find wiki links, it doesn't interrupt a flow. I don't have to, I don't have to use a mouse. I can just very easily autocomplete something if it already exists. I don't have to like search up what I called that other page, including I can be like, oh yeah, I might come back to this later, right? So that what you talked about, that like empty wiki link is a tickler that says, oh yeah, this is a concept. I may or may not come back to it.
Yeah. I think that's the key thing there, that you don't really have a pressure to do anything about it, or at least it's clear to you. And maybe this is maybe why our brains work differently. And in my case, like if I see something like that, it just feels like, oh man, I have to do something about that. And so what I find exhausting is to see something like that and feel this pressure that I have to like fill out space.
Right.
And there's nothing in the software that's going to hold me back, and it actually kind of feels good to have that space filled out, because like, oh yeah, now it's like it's all there and it's all in the right place and it's all structured. And so for me, I don't see a mechanism that where I will prevent myself from doing too much and feeling overwhelmed, but you somehow know that it works for you, and also you don't do it too much to the point where,
yeah,
like,
I mean, I think this, I totally get what you mean. I know that you can I think you could probably write a little query in LogSeq to like show empty pages. I know that feature exists. I think it's actually called orphans or something like that.
Yeah.
In TiddlyWiki, where people might feel the need to like fill all those out. I'm not immune to rabbit holing in my own notes where, I tag Rosano. I look at that Rosano page. I think of all of the great things that I want to link to there. And then I tag Zero Data Apps, and I'm like, well, I really should fill something in there. And do all that. I think some of the stuff is the two things with backlinks that most modern systems have is the linked references and unlinked references. I think that's sort of interesting as well, right? If I'm tagging Rosano, then that's like, oh yeah, that's definitely something that I want to see linked to that. And then there's the unlinked references where I might type Rosano without adding the wiki links.
Oh yeah.
And then, but yeah, no, I definitely, I know people who get sucked into, I'm actually looking in my Rosano node is in fact, has 4 linked references and 6 unlinked ones. And
God.
But it's an empty node.
Yeah.
So it doesn't
It's
even have the
thing with
person tag
Notion,
on
for
it.
example. I mean, Notion, for example, is another thing. It looks so beautiful when it's done and complete and it's structured. And I just think about having to do that work, and I just don't even bother trying it, because it just it exhausts me. Like there's a new thing that came out recently called AnyType, which has some interesting like peer-to-peer stuff, and maybe you own your data, and I love all of those things. And I look at the tool, and the possibility of having the option to structure things in that way just like completely short circuits my brain, and I can't look at it.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know.
That's why I use tags, and would I prefer them, and prefer the methodology of this is not my name. There was a Capsule CRM, I think, used this name, super tag, where basically you can like actually turn a tag into an object and give it like typed properties. So I might create a tag called article and then give it a property of a link, but that's still like, that's a lot of structure. I kind of, and it's very interesting that tools can support both of these things. I saw AnyType. I have it installed. I know the team. It's super cool. And I think what's interesting about that is that it's not really TiddlyWiki, and I guess Notion kind of does this as well. Is I think for most people, you're not going to think in complete objects, and I get you in the like. I almost think of it more like programming, where I'm like, man, it feels a lot like work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still, anyway, I mean, I can share a bit about what I do. I guess that the things that feel natural for me, which is basically like write stuff down when it occurs to me, take notes from stuff that I read, paraphrase them if I can, and then I haven't really found a way to do stuff with my notes. So I feel like there's a gap. There's something I want to use to fill that gap, and it might end up being something like LogSeq or Obsidian or something. But I'm just trying to figure out what the best way is to harmonize what the tool does with what my instincts are, with the kind of stuff that I tend to document. Also, how I like things to look. Like I'm not really a fan of the bullet points, the sort of infinitely nesting bullet points thing. Like I think it's cool and it's fun to play with. Maybe it's fun to look at. But for me, just thinking that way, I feel like it again comes back to this feeling of having to structure things and put things in boxes and like where does it go. I just keep resisting that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the really interesting thing has been the journal concept again. Like I'm sitting here in 2023 on the other side of like writing stuff and putting it online since kind of late 2000, early 2001, and
since being one of the first 1,000 bloggers.
Yeah, and there's these things that have been built up, right? So I mean, blogs had dates, and some early popular blogging software like the scripting.com stuff actually had these like the concept was daily pages, and then you kind of had like anchors to 9:41 a.m. on July 16th. And that was the way that stuff was put in there. And so I really enjoy that in the systems that I use today actively, also having this journal slash the day, where the day becoming the container immediately means that it's the only structure that you need. On this day, I had a thought and put some notes down. Cool. That's it. I don't have to do a step 2 if I don't want to.
Yeah, out of everything I said that might feel negative about these tools, this is definitely something I'm totally envious of, and I wish, I can totally do it, but it's like, it's just text that I write down, right? There's no structure, there's no nodes that come out of it. So I really kind of want that, and I love the idea of being able to dump on a day and then just have it in a place and it makes sense. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I think some of these things are a lot less structured than you think, in the sense that, the journal type in TiddlyWiki just is a tiddler with the journal tag applied and your choice of date formatting pre-filled as the title. So I think doing that, just it's pretty easy to get to that level of consistency. I would like a little bit more programming. One of the things that I want to do with my LogSeq is an on this day, as also being a mechanism to kind of explore notes and happenings. I think some of this stuff leads to navel gazing in some ways, to your point again about the whole, like, what am I getting from it? Yeah. I have, I wrote down a couple things that you said. And I think how much it pays off, I kind of covered that yesterday in sort of like, I don't really worry about it. It's for me, and if I enjoy doing it, great. And the other paying off is just having a link to share with other people that may incidentally be interesting for other folks over time. I would like to use my notes as a kind of like reminder recommender engine for myself. I now
I totally
remember
get
that.
what you said about it being for you, but like, for example, you have this lapse since March where you weren't able to do the daily, or at least publish the daily notes publicly. So maybe you were super busy during that time, some kind of conference or something. But it isn't the point of a system like this to be able to support you during that time. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, is it a relation to tooling? It's how I'm feeling. I kind of was starting this earlier where I write in a lot of places already. So what is being seen here is really the like inner monologue stuff, where I've built my own constraints about what I post here, right? I'm not going to post deeply about my day job here.
Right.
Not that I wouldn't write about it, but it's kind of just one of my internal feedback loops of like, well, that's not what this space is necessary for. And I kind of have bucketed a bunch of things around like food to my food wiki, right? Like this is not one magical brain that everything connects to. Totally. And so that blank period is me being a little bit annoyed literally with the tool itself, and how the publishing flow works. But on the other hand, what's been interesting is I do have it all set up that I just, I picked back up over the last couple of days and it's totally fine. So I also feel very strongly about the easiest way to do, I think the tools have to be very clear when things are going to be in public and when they're in private. It's a user safety, user privacy thing, and also for me, a psychological safety thing that I know that I can write whatever I want in a system that I've set up, and it won't accidentally leak.
Oh, so maybe this is an important distinction to make, because what I've been referring to here is your public graph journal notes, etc. And you have this private one, and so obviously nobody knows what's in there. But do you also have a lapse in that one, or did you manage?
No. So that's much more scratch paddy.
Okay.
Some of my public stuff ends up being scratch paddy because I'll use it to write up how I'm setting up my home lab, and I'll literally be like, I don't know how to do this. Let me go like Google this Linux command, etc. And oftentimes that's some of the stuff that's most valuable both for me. But yeah, my private notes are end up being the kind of stuff where I will do very raw notes from meetings that really aren't really understandable by anyone else than me. Use that as my sort of to-do area and other stuff like that. So it's much more scratch pad, basically. I may end up having something useful that I like put in public or whatever, but because I then choose to go like, oh, this is interesting, I should write this up as a more polished public version because I think this is going to be useful if I share it with people.
Yeah, this is also where one of my some of my resistance is, because I don't like the idea of having to use two different books or two different, like a public space and a private space. Like I like my tool is set up to have one space and they're all just your private notes and you pick certain ones to publish. And for me, that's super simple. And we can set aside the conversation about whether it's actually secure as the way it is. But I mean, it's one thing that I have to use, and it syncs to all of my devices, and it's the same place every time, and I more or less have a choice about what I share and what I don't, and I just kind of like that. So that's kind of the issue with me, because if I were to use a graph tool and this journal thing, I feel like I couldn't simply just publish from that. Or
You can, you can. So this is all a quirk in part of my setup.
Like, yeah. I can publish partially, but it's not integrated with all of the other stuff that I've published. So basically, then it's another like two system problem. And so I'm actually trying to.
Not really. Like, I don't like so LogSeq default mode is actually private only, and you have to add like public true to every page that you want to publish. And for me, I find it easier to there's a global switch that you can just that said treat all pages as public for publishing, and that works for me. That is the best thing for me. You can also run it where you add this public tag, and it will only publish public things. The additional thing, regardless of that tag, is it's in a public GitHub repo. So even if I had a private tag, it would still be visible.
Right.
It doesn't have to be in a public GitHub repo. Again,
when I'm talking
it's just
about,
sort of
when I'm talking about two different systems, are you saying that because it's in a repo, I can publish stuff from a different app like Hyperdraft into that repo, and therefore it merges well, like in a public way? Because that was kind of my issue.
No. It's an explanation of why I have the setup that I do, where having a private notes and public notes is in part because of the deficiencies of the publishing tool chain.
Right. Hard to trust when something's completely private because something might accidentally leak.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think, like some of the other stuff you had here, why stuff seems to be hard on mobile. So the people in the more tools for thought space, I have had some heated discussions where they're like, well, you can't do serious writing on mobile. I'm like, well, I do all the time. Or you're denigrating me and my workflow when I choose to use a different tool. Or the vast majority of humanity only has mobile phones as their only computing device. Are you telling me they can't do serious work with that phone?
Right.
And so one of those things is, and there's lots of other issues like the general walled garden nature of app stores and so on. So, so for some people it's on principle, as it were, to make tools. But for me, a lot of that stuff is like, no, I'm keeping in mind that some of this stuff should generally be useful for everyone, which means great mobile support. For me in particular, I do a lot of my reading of long form articles and other stuff like that, and stuff that I want to clip or keep. I do on mobile, so that has to work well. LogSeq works great on mobile. TiddlyWiki isn't really designed for any of that, but there's an app called Quine on iOS that actually works quite well. But as soon as you're on mobile, you need to figure out sync systems.
Right. Yeah.
And many of these systems, so TiddlyWiki kind of like sync, it doesn't really, there's various complicated ways to do that. LogSeq has a built-in sync and publishing thing, and or you can use iCloud, but none of that actually ties into a publishing workflow by default. And so I use Git and working copy on iOS in order to do stuff on desktop and on mobile and be able to publish. So for me, the main thing is I want to be able to publish from mobile. I don't want to have to find a computer and make sure that a computer has a proper programming environment set up or anything else like that. I wanted to, just use Git as the way that then triggers a publishing flow. So I have that set up. It is not convenient or easy for anyone else to do.
I can imagine.
And Obsidian Publish is the only one that seems to sort of be set up. And it's $20 a month.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
Okay. For just the sync? Sorry, just the... No, for the publish.
Publish.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't... Okay, yeah. Well, $8 a month. $10 a month for publish, $10 a month for sync.
Sorry, yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yeah. I have a hesitation also with this because I feel like I sort of don't own it in a way. I mean, I own my notes. I can take my text files with me, but the thing that's published online, like I think also the more technological it is, the more like an app it is. Like it presents these nodes and everything. I feel like it's like somebody else's app, and I can't just like. I mean, they're different goals anyway. Like I think my mind is still in this like turn your text notes into a website. A website is a thing that has mostly text, and you can write and link, and that's basically what you want to do there. So I think with this kind of mindset, the sort of published app version of your knowledge graph feels like I'm losing agency or control over how my stuff is presented or how it might be accessed, or it just feels like I'm letting go of something that I don't want to let go of.
Yeah, I think I think,
and on top of that, it might be kind of hard on mobile, etc. But it's definitely useful.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this was another thing that you said that was slightly different. The sort of like JS heavy stuff. So again, I look back and so I linked to it the other day, right? I've got my like hand rolled 2022 edition that I'll probably do more of because it's very easy to do with IPFS. That I'm using as the publishing flow underneath, where I quite liked my hand-built digital garden, built-in Jekyll with a few bits and pieces on top of it, but it ends up being pretty fragile. And then, if I'm spending my time needing to get back to a computer and like fixing stuff,
build errors,
that's painful. So. I think there's some interesting like search features and other stuff like that are kind of like built into the app publish, but I like the current version of LogSeq doesn't. That is my biggest problem, is the way that it publishes. I know how to fix this, or rather, I know how would one write the code to do this, where basically there's really well-structured JSON underneath LogSeq, and someone would need to write a parser for that to turn it into something not just the parser. There's literally the underlying markdown files also exist.
Right.
That are all in there, and the publishing plugin that I just used because it's the one that was available, and I'm not enough of a programmer to be able to fix this. Publishes it, but it publishes it in this format that is not ideal at all. It replicates, as you said, literally the like desktop feel of of the system. And I think the biggest tension is in digital gardens is in fact the like notes versus published blog articles. And doing them both in the same engine is difficult. But it would totally be possible to do something way slimmer and more lighter weight. TiddlyWiki and my food wiki is kind of the other way around. I have to essentially do programming to get a static version, and I have a very basic version of this right now, but I miss a bunch of backlinks and search and a bunch of other stuff like that, which get lost from doing the flat version. So there's some like tension in both directions with that.
Yeah, this thing about notes versus blog posts is something that I've been reflecting on now, and I think I'm having quite a transformation in how I think about it. I used to preach a lot this preference for like atomic ideas and a single idea on a single page, etc. And so even like let's call it like smaller pages with tiny little things. Avoiding blogs. Blogs are bad because they're chronological. They don't, chronological is not a context for understanding things, and like, it's better to write the structure. It's important to when you describe the connections between things using your words and using your language, you're creating a better structure than just sort by date effectively. The ideas don't disappear. You can resurface. I had all of these ideas in my head, and I agree with some of them, but I think now I find that a bit dogmatic. And I used to be purely. I had this garden. I still have this garden, which is non-linear and graph-like. There is no chronological listing, and then at some point I started publishing them to Ghost so that there could be a chronological layout for the same content. So I would give the Ghost to people that preferred that kind of thing, and people who wanted the gardens, I would they could just use my garden. And then at some point I realized like actually people don't want to click around gardens because it's kind of too time consuming, and you have to figure out like you basically have to click on anything you have to click on a lot of things to understand what there is to click on, and that's sort of gonna throw people off. And you kind of have this I have this reflex when I encounter somebody's digital garden. I think, oh, this is kind of interesting. I'd like to read this garden. You have to figure out where do you start, and it would be really nice to just start at the most recent thing, just see what they're talking about now, and maybe work my way backwards. And if it stops being interesting, then maybe I don't need to keep going. So it's kind of a nice. I think of it as ergonomic. Like chronological actually feels kind of ergonomic in that way. There's a clear entryway into the thing, and you can get some information about how interesting it is to you without having to just click on a bunch of random stuff. And then there's basically this idea that actually like everything is chronological, even if you don't put it in a feed or a timeline or something. Like you're always writing something in the context
in time and space.
In time and space, or in the context of your own personal development, which is a kind of timeline, or in terms of history or evolution of humanity, whatever. Like it's always, I don't really think you can say something that is completely devoid of time. So and we say all the time, like, oh yeah, well, I might write something. I might write one of these leaf notes, but then the ideas can change, and I can update my thinking as time goes on. So it's not actually free of time anyway. So you might as well just
lean into it.
I feel like it's more, it's actually more meaningful to just have a snapshot of yourself as maybe a blog entry or a journal entry, and say that's how I was thinking at that time, and I can resurface the idea in a new post. And like I mentioned what Gordon Brander's doing a lot with the subconscious newsletter, and I think he's doing a great job of like resurfacing things. Like it feels like he's actually doing both simultaneously somehow, even though I think he's trying more to do it as a chronological publication. So something maybe to learn there. But I think I'm moving more towards probably just discarding this non-chronological / wiki style thing. Like I might still do wiki pages, but basically the primary thing I'm doing is chronological, I think, and I'm going to lean into that.
Stock and flow is some of the old phrases around this.
Stock and flow.
Yeah. I have some writing around that I can link to. Some of the stuff that you talked about, the atomic notes and so on, come from the Zettelkasten tradition, and I think it's extremely dogmatic. I think the other thing ends up being. So I've got
by the way, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. I just mentioned I would love to read somebody's Zettelkasten because the ideas are placed together in some sort of ordering. Like the ordering of the things is in physical space is what actually gives it meaning, and so that would be interesting. Like a library bookshelf is interesting because you can see related stuff. But the digital garden somehow, because it's links and all of them seem to have equal weight, you don't really get meaning out of that in the same way. So I would like to just make that distinction. But yeah,
I just started trying to see if I can use the whiteboard in LogSeq. Actually, what I was using it for, like literally the first time I've ever used it, I just haven't had a use for it. To draw a diagram of my home network. So we'll see. I have no idea what it looks like when it publishes, or if my publishing flow actually works with whiteboard. So we'll see soon. I'm looking at your garden.
Very outdated.
I've been dropping links in the chat off to the side here. I don't know if you can actually see that.
I did not know there was a chat. Okay. Okay, got it.
So you do have some hints on where people might go, but they're pretty they're more like categories like music or design or technology or writing or whatever's top of mind. And then you have some links like that. I'll actually I did the same thing with some of my default FoodWiki pages, where I created some my kind of intro page has links to stuff, high level, right? Like so, my shopping list isn't linked. Pantry, freezer, stores, recipe list, cookbook, and then I even go from there to custom index pages. There's a bunch of things in there that lets people kind of dive in a little way if they don't want to just like poke around through the journals. Same thing. I made a custom homepage that loads by default in my B-Man Consulting site, where like right up front you can click through to my daily journals. But I kind of manually put some stuff like, I've been writing about Mastodon and ActivityBub. I've been doing stuff with the Twitter archive. And then I have what I call seeds, which are some interesting quotes and articles that I find interesting and important right now, kind of provocations. I'm not really so worried about the way that search works, and the SEO and permalinks for this site is an issue. I kind of find search generally for personal content to just be completely broken these days. But like I know that there's going to be a vanishingly small number of people that navigate directly to this homepage and then just poke around, because there's just not that many people. That's not how interactivity on the internet works today. Or the person who pauses and goes, this is interesting, I think I'm going to click around, I will probably vibe with, and that person will probably enjoy clicking around, something like that. And then I think, so I think that's definitely one thing where you're, and this goes back again to notes versus blog posts. In part, I'm writing, if I sit down and write a blog post, which I do very rarely these days, I wrote a little fragment of a thread yesterday that I actually would like to bring up, that I'll share in a second, And the blog post is written, like, in part, you're writing it in prose. You can, wiki link to other stuff for sort of further reading and exploration. But I think a blog post is prose in a very human-directed way, where it's less effort because someone has put some thought into doing this. And you might just go like, huh, that's interesting, or huh, that was a nice story, or like, huh, this has really made me think, or huh, I'm convinced, or I believe Boris's point of view that he has put forth in this particular blog post. Right? I think that's a huge thing. Like, that's human communication.
Yeah.
I think my issue with some of the tools for thought is that way too many people take themselves way too seriously. Like, if we just groom our notes backlog a little bit better, I don't know, the world changes? Like, nope.
Yeah, ultimately we still have to I mean, if one person gets their notes in order, it's nicer to just have we have this idea of like a collective brain, or like civilization as a whole thinking together. And so I think, it helps when one person has their notes cleaned up, but also if other people have access into doing this kind of thing, or they're somehow brought into it,
Yes.
or included, even if they don't, like, the way they think is not legible to this kind of stuff, like, then it becomes more productive or interesting. And otherwise it just be like, people digital gardening about digital gardening, which is sort of self-reflecting.
It's a stage that all these things go through. I think you bring up a very interesting point, and it's something that I'm in part my lapse was like, I'm done. I don't have the time and effort to like fix this right now. Don't have the skills, and I don't have like $1,000 to pay someone hourly to sit down and build the LogSeq publisher that I pretty much know how it could be built. I'm gonna like wait for Newsphere, because really what I do want is the multiplayer version that seamlessly links work on the internet. Fantastic. But having a bit of an upgrade that lets us intertwingle our notes a little bit more. Like where I can link into your Zero Data Apps page that you've already written up because it's your project. I'm like, amazing. I can just use that and transclude the Rosano version. Fantastic. So all of a sudden, two people keeping their notes up to date is greater than the sum of its parts. Woohoo!
Yeah, I'm excited for that as well.
I think this is maybe sort of a natural ending, but I actually did want to share with you. I think this is partially relevant, but more on the kind of social media side of things. And an example of something that is not a blog post and that I just went ahead and posted on social media. We're in a post-printing press, post-telephone world, but we're in the messy middle of figuring out the internet. What do we need to work on? Engaging with and understanding the governance stack that both includes physical wires and servers and hard national borders and laws, and all of the other software stuff that's sort of everywhere. Robin Burgeon calls this the internet transition. To sum things up, we're trying to run a planetary society that needs to solar punk the fuck out of itself in a hurry on the collective intelligence of an 18th century principality that's heard of the Enlightenment from some guy at the pub. So this is in part what I'm thinking about, is that we do need that upgrade to the intertwinkled newspheres to be able to understand and communicate a little better versus what we've got now.
I have nothing to add to that. Sounds great. Sounds great, Boris.
Yeah, still not a blog post. Still a little obscure. Needs lots of work and reading by people. This has been fun. We'll get a recording out of this and share it and post it and see what people think about our blathering.
Exactly.
Classic podcast style.
If they click around and find out, yeah.
Exactly. I was thinking that we might share the link and have some other people, but this was low stress and I think worked pretty well. Yeah. I'm going to figure out how to stop this recording. Final thoughts, Rosanna.
I keep wanting to come back to these like reasons for writing. Some of them, like the ones that you've expressed, I think were really nice, and also this post that you shared recently. Nobody cares about your blog. Like, there's so many nice. Like, I just love the. I feel like they're nice. What do you say? Invocations or like affirmations to just say every now and then, and maybe we should all just repeat them to ourselves every now and then to just connect us with the value of writing things down and documenting things, and maybe the feeling that we have of like why we do all this, so that it kind of goes somewhere and things happen as a result of it, like the potency of words and writing down. Kind of hard for me. There's so many different points, so maybe I'll just like pick 5 of them that I think are cool and just read them out between yours and this post. But
yeah,
or maybe let's start with yours. So I do it for me first, as I've always done for blogging. I hope to get better at asking questions of my notes. If I'm going to write something up to share with someone, chances are it's useful for other people, so why not publish it so it can easily be shared? I would add, it does not have to be prose. I think I owe a lot to blogging, and this is something huge for me also. Like, how much do we all owe to just finding stuff that somebody else did and benefiting from it? So this for me is a huge reason to like publish things in any format. And yeah, maybe, and then I'll just do maybe a couple from this other one. So you can use, so this is from the blog post, Nobody Cares About Your Blog by Alex Molas. And some reasons about why you should care about your blog. You can use it as notes to your future self. After some years, you'll have a nice journal of how you've evolved over the years. Rereading your old texts is like communicating with your past self. To release ideas that you have in your head and that you need to get out is one of the reasons. Even if nobody else cares about them, writing them down can be a cathartic process. Even if the ideas you're sharing with the world aren't original, you can enrich them with your personal view. As Bill Thurston said, all of us have clear understanding of a few things and murky concepts of many more. There's no way to run out of ideas in need of clarification. And then the last one is like, you can say whatever the F you want. It's your blog. You don't need to follow any rules. I just cursed and you can't do anything about it because this is my space and I can do whatever I want. This will give you a sense of freedom. That's really cool. So yeah, I just think all of these reasons for just, it makes me want to just write and share and document and share. So I think if we're focused on that, and I think that the tools can sort of bring themselves more in line with things that make us excited about expressing things and not getting burdened by technology, etc. And then we have all of these wonderful things floating around that we benefit from, and that's cool.
Yep. Humans being able to put stuff on the internet that other humans can find.
Forever.
Fantastic. That's it. That's all.
It was a pleasure.
New sphere.